We have learned more about where those people who were detained in last week's ICE raid are or have been moved to. According to ICE, 3 people that were in the country illegally from Mexico voluntarily returned back to Mexico. ICE officials also say 3 other people were in the country illegally from Guatemala. Those there have been transferred to Louisiana, where they will wait for their future removal. ICE confirms there are still more than 60 people in local custody at the Lincoln County Detention Center pending immigration proceedings.